This happened about a year ago now. To set the scene, my darling dear friend, we'll call her Alice, F24, was getting married to her girlfriend, F23, of 4 years. We'll call her Jenny. From what I know, Alice and Jenny met when they were 15 on their high school's cheerleading team and did not get along. I mean actual screaming matches in the parking lot type beat. I'm talking lawn chairs and popcorn were out when they got into it. Skip to a remarkable, earth-shattering junior year and Jenny's prom date just kissed Alice at the prom. When Alice, who is staunchly anti-cheaters and may or may not be plotting satanic rituals to perform upon such people as her mom was routinely accused of cheating despite no proof coming forth, found out that the guy was cheating, she and Jenny had a come to Jesus kumbaya where they proceeded to bond over messaging his parents and the entire basketball team in an act of shaming him. Now for the relevant come to. During this time, Alice and Jenny started staying over at each other's houses. It should be noted that Jenny and Alice are both very feminine and Jenny is black. I wish it wasn't relevant, but it's a little relevant. Jenny met Alice's parents. I do want to say that I personally met Alice's parents during our collective freshman year of college, which is when I met Alice and Jenny. Her mom is a saint and I absolutely adore her. Should she ever read this, which she almost definitely won't, then I would actually literally biblically take a bullet for you, Mrs. J. Her dad, M48, we'll call him Chad, is a bit of a red pill podcast listening loser, and that's if I'm being charitable. He's weirdly homophobic, transphobic, and misogynistic while also ranting the ear off of anyone who will listen about how he's a savior of these people. I don't have all the details of what happened to make Jenny hate him, but I do know it has something to do with him repeatedly referring to her as the black chick despite knowing her name. But I digress. Cut to college. I've just met Alice and Jenny, love them dearly, and have the misfortune of meeting Chad in the flesh. It should be noted that Alice came out when she was 17 and Jenny's family is very supportive and has a few other queer family members within the unit. Despite Alice coming out as gay, her dad, and I have seen the texts I shit you not, said that it's normal for everyone to have sexual feelings for the same gender. Don't worry about it and find a man too, redacted, you good enough that you forget about it. I wish I was joking, but he did send that text to his daughter. But it was at that time that I heard Alice and Jenny had just gotten together and I was happy for them, so Alice blocked Chad for a bit and all was well, until the wedding. I know that Chad knows that Alice and Jenny are together. I know that Chad knows that Alice and Jenny got engaged. I was at the engagement party where he was present. But apparently even reality can't stop Chad. It'd be iconic if only boldness wasn't wasted on the wretched. Chad also has a history of smoking no matter the location and pretending not to see no smoking signs. Still, Chad called Alice during a girls' night, absolutely pissed that she was taking the joke this far and had to stop living with Jenny or men would get the wrong idea. He started saying something about her biological clock and having his DNA when Alice very firmly cut him off and asked what he was talking about. Apparently, somehow, some way, Chad thought that her wedding invitations were a joke. It was a spin-off of the and they were roommates joke, so on the invitation was a glittery pink and they were wives that we'd designed after a few daiquiris. After a back and forth on speakerphone, Alice hung up after telling him that he was an idiot for thinking that she was in a long-standing joke about having a girlfriend for 4 years. You might be wondering where Alice's mom is in all of this. Blissfully uninvolved. The best part of Mrs. J and Chad is that it's an open secret that she desperately wants to divorce him but won't until all of their children together are 18 because she wants to preserve normalcy for the kids. As of today, they should be getting a divorce in about 5 months. She very seriously makes her stance clear that she loves her children and is thrilled to welcome Jenny as her newest daughter. So, we get to the night before the wedding and we're jazzed. I'm going back and forth between suites at this gorgeous venue passing notes between Jenny and Alice like they're lovesick teenagers. I'm doing the thing, we're giggling and having fun, and between both parties which just consists of our entire combined inner friend group from college including the he's, she's, and they's, we're having the best time. Until Chad walks into Jenny's suite. You heard that right. Jenny. Not Alice, his daughter. He was lucky to be invited to the wedding in my opinion, but this was insane and I only heard the half of it. Supposedly, he knocked on the door and walked into the room when someone opened it to ask what was up and he started laying into her on how she was a bitch, unclean, and pulled out printed photos of the devil according to the Christian Bible and left. So they're sitting there after this whirlwind and the guys are making sure Chad left. That's when I walk in, hear the situation, then rush back to Alice to make sure her room wasn't next on his hit list. Get this, Chad isn't religious. Like actually. Like literally. Also, according to Alice, he had stopped taking his medication a week prior to be more present at her wedding, but that medication was what kept him from hallucinating. We shook it off as best as possible and took an early night to chill before the wedding. But then we get to the wedding, the ceremony? Gorgeous. Cocktail hour? Stunning. Their first dance? Sobbing. We went around giving speeches celebrating them when it gets to be Chad's turn to give a speech. Get this, no one can find him for about 10 minutes. The party in particular is mad suspicious of this, but then Mrs. J sighed with the force of a woman who's been mentally divorced for a decade, got up from her chair, walked over to one of the beautiful wide floor-to-ceiling windows on every wall, then shines her phone flashlight out into the darkness where part of the party was going to take place. The lights were going to be turned on when they walked out after the dinner. And there Chad was. In all his lack of glory, in his suit, trying to wiggle dry sticks together Boy Scout style to set a fire to the lawn. Remember how I said he was a prolific smoker? Yep. He most certainly had a lighter in his pocket, but in the moment he had resorted to pulling sticks in a hallucinatory daze. Now, I know you're probably wanting to write his behavior off on his medication. Don't. This man has been drunk texting his children for years about them being/not being biologically worthy. He has been abusing his wife for years. He is damn lucky anyone is still willing to talk to him after he has threatened to unalive several people over the years, including his daughters and son. He is not a good person. His hallucinations started 3 or so years ago. He has stated that he prefers being angry and bitter because that means he is smarter. Anger equals intelligence in this man's eyes. He waited no more than 13 hours after his wife's father died to tell everyone how much he always hated him. Her grief was less important than his feelings. He has no room for love in his heart, even on his daughter's wedding day. If you couldn't tell, he didn't succeed in setting fire to their venue and was ushered home for a nap. He also didn't succeed in ruining their wedding day. I have a few more Chad stories from my personal beef with him and a little more on why none of his children talk to him if you'd like to hear them. I'm considered a close family friend of 6 years now, which is why I know a lot of this. We're keeping this anon so we should be good at it. I wanted to clarify a few things I didn't add. 1. When Chad was outside wiggling sticks together, he was doing so on one of the tables outside where the rest of the reception was going to take place with more dancing. Since this was an autumn wedding, there were enough dried leaves that he grabbed a handful and put them on the table. He wasn't exactly yelling when he was driven home, but he was talking about how the whole thing should burn, then demanded Mrs. J bring him a slice of wedding cake. To my knowledge, she did not. 2. Chad was given a speech at the wedding because he promised to let Alice and Jenny proofread it beforehand. Mrs. J was going to proofread it originally, but Chad accused her of trying to tamper with it, so she walked away. Chad was allowed at the wedding at all because he wasn't even the one walking her down the aisle. Alice and Jenny had their moms do that. He didn't have a ton of responsibility, and up until the night before, he'd been on a 2-month stretch of being relatively normal. He'd been taking his medication and seemed to be putting in the work to improve their relationship. Then he stopped taking his medication consciously. 3. Whenever Chad is asked about why he tried to light the venue on fire, albeit poorly, he states that never happened. Sometimes he'll joke and say that he was just trying to set up a bonfire for his little girl to remind them of when they used to go camping. Spoiler, he went camping with Alice's younger sister, not Alice. He has always mixed up his children, this isn't new. 4. Chad is still in Alice and Jenny's life. He started taking his medication again immediately after the wedding, followed by a text saying that Alice was being unfair for letting her own father leave. He's normal half the time, but I suspect that when Alice and Jenny start welcoming kidlets into their family, they'll go lower or no contact. They currently see him twice a month. Update 1. I'd like to say that I also just don't feel bad about this, and I'm more than willing to accept that I'm an a-hole. In the last 2 weeks, my original post had our friend group talking a little bit more about what happened during Alice and Jenny's wedding last year. It should be noted that they were 22-23 when they got married and 23-24 now, but most of our friend group is between 21 and 25. A lot of us are still in the last legs of university or grad school right now. I am not from the States. I'm 22 and just started grad school this past year. Their anniversary party was last Saturday so that everyone could attend, but it's not their actual anniversary date. Both Alice and Jenny have pretty well-paying jobs for being relatively fresh out of university, but it's not super surprising since they had fantastic internships in college and got hired through these companies. They have a good-sized place, not a house because literally who can afford that, and just adopted 2 cats and a retired service dog. In comes Chad. Oh, Chad. Basically, one of the main issues with Chad and I in particular is that I'm not from the States. I still have an accent, since English is not my first language, but I'm absolutely fluent and you can hardly hear my accent at all. I'm also pretty pale, so that's why I'm guessing he didn't realize it sooner into our vague acquaintanceship through Alice. I'm also the only person in the friend group that wasn't born in America, but our friend group is very diverse besides that. After the catastrophe of the wedding, it's a shock that Chad was allowed to come to the party at all. He did, however, seem to get better in the last few months, and Jenny in particular is very forgiving, so she pushed to invite him. This was fine for the most part, since Chad was actually genuinely looking to have gotten a little more normal. I wrote my original post in the mindset of a person who hasn't interacted with Chad in well over 3 months. Supposedly he switched up his medication and seems to be more normal, and I was actually sort of happy for Alice. As much as I dislike the man, I want Alice to have this part of her support system. But then we get to the party. Chad was super respectful and thankful about the invitation to the party up until a week before, when he asked, out of the blue, "Is Cheerios coming?" Alice replied that yes, of course I'm going, and I made them a cake. Radio silence since then until the day of the party, where Chad sent a text saying he was on the way. Chad walks in, and who does he see? Oh yeah, me. I was by the door chatting with a friend when Chad walks in, looks at me, and just says "you mother redacted." I know Chad isn't my biggest fan, but I was a little taken aback considering this is the first time Chad has talked to me since the July 4th party. I tried to make a joke with finger guns and say "you mother" redacted right back to him, but he didn't think it was very funny. Instead, he decided to tell me how immigrants are going to hell. Like, bro, hello to you too? Well, he told me that he didn't want to see me for the rest of the party and that I should leave and never come back or avoid him for the rest of our lives. I did tell Alice and Jenny about this the other day, but they didn't hear a word about this exchange for the rest of the night. You might be wondering why. The fun thing about this party was that there were many planned games. Planned partner games, even, where you could choose your partner. Charades, Cards Against Humanity, blind drawing, Pictionary, a scavenger hunt, and a fun murder mystery to round off the night. All two-person adjusted partnership games that Alice and Jenny planned so that everyone could have fun whether or not they were drinking. If you haven't guessed what I did just yet, I want you to just imagine what I could have done with this information, this conversation, and the knowledge that literally no one there wanted to be Chad's babysitter for the night. Every single time it was called for people to find a partner, I latched on like a tapeworm, a leech, even a glued down magnet on metal. Every time Chad tried to find a new partner or sit out, I was there. There was one point where I literally jumped over the side of the couch just to keep him from partnering with Alice so that she could enjoy her anniversary, because I could tell that he was going to say something about me to her and she would have gotten upset about it. Then Jenny would have been upset, then Chad would have yelled, so I just cut out the middleman. Every time he tried to make a comment about me, I'd talk loud and proud right over him. He'd try to pull out a cigarette and smoke indoors. I'd snatch it out of his hand, thank him for the offer, and stuff it in my pocket. He'd try to run off. I'd offer to grab us buddies drinks mid-game. He'd try to complain to someone. I'd loudly laugh and say, "Wow, what a funny joke, Chad." Right, Chad? Wasn't that a joke? At Alice's anniversary party? At any point, if he walked away, I was right on his heels, telling him all about where I lived before moving to the States. Eventually I think I broke part of his nasty, no good spirit, because at the end of the night he was nearly falling asleep on the couch before he was ushered into a car. If you're wondering, I only grabbed him mocktails. The guy couldn't even use alcohol as an escape. I was also absolutely exhausted, but the only thing he managed to say to Alice was a tired congratulations and a complaint about the booze, so she was pretty happy. Jenny was also thrilled that her father-in-law didn't manage any racist remarks to her. To be perfectly honest, I was kind of miserable the whole night, but that's what friends are for. The party wasn't for me to get absolutely sloshed, despite that being the plan. It was for Alice to enjoy her party and try her best to maintain her low-contact relationship with her dad. If it were me, I'd cut contact with no sweat off my back, but it's not my relationship. And, thankfully, that's not my father. It's not my decision to make, but I do feel a little vindicated in knowing that I made Chad's night his worst nightmare. Mrs. J also had a good time as far as I know, but part of my mission was also letting her have a night off from being Chad's babysitter, so I avoided her at all costs. Anywho, I made myself the sacrificial lamb last week. I'm definitely at least a little bit of an a-hole, but I think I could make a business out of being the ultimate Phil distractor. Edit, for those of you asking for Mrs. J's reaction, I can deliver. So, this happened last Saturday, but I only got to meet back up with Alice and Jenny on Wednesday this week. I was meeting them at my apartment for our Wednesday movie extravaganza that we've been doing since sophomore year of university, and of course we were chatting about their engagement party. Now, something about me is that I can't keep my mouth shut to save my life, okay? I'm a professional yapper of anything that I haven't been explicitly told not to share. I'm a secret keeper until death, but everything else is fair game unless there's a clear indication that it shouldn't be shared around, embarrassing, excessively personal, etc. Alice said that Mrs. J had commented on their usual phone call that apparently Chad had been pretty upset since the party. Not in a violent way, but in the way a toddler pouts about being put in timeout. I immediately started laughing my butt off about it and shared what had happened that night. Alice was a little upset that Chad had to be corralled into behaving, but was ultimately happy that I put a stop to any antics. Jenny just found it funny in general and asked me if I hire out my services for weddings. Alice also called Mrs. J and put her on speakerphone and said that she had to hear about me saving the night. Mrs. J actually asked me if I wanted payment for it. She said this mostly joking, but I could tell she was at least a little serious. She said that she'd been really anxious for the first half of the night about Chad doing something insane to ruin the night and that it serves him right for being an idiot, and that he'd made other comments about my immigration status before. Apparently, they'd gotten into a minor argument the morning of, so she'd been convinced he would lash out somehow. I guess I not only saved the party, but also made Chad chill for the week. I didn't let her pay me, of course, but Alice and Jenny dropped off a bottle of vintage red today, so I'm happy as a clam. I am a little concerned that my actions might have made him a little violent, but I don't think Mrs. J would stay if he did, considering she's already plotting divorce. Now on to second story. Couldn't fire my bird-phobic employee despite his actions that severely injured a coworker, which led to her quitting an industry-wide gossip. I'm a manager. I'm having an issue with the two of my staff, Liz and Jack. They were returning from an off-site meeting and had parked in front of our building. According to Liz and other witnesses, there was a bird on the sidewalk, and when it flew away, Jack ran. Liz was less than a step ahead of him and he pushed her out of the way when he was running. Liz fell off the curb and got hit by a car that was parking. She ended up covered in bruises and breaking both bones in one forearm. Liz had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. The breaks were in the middle of her forearm and were so bad that Liz had surgery on her arm the next day and required a total hospital stay of 4 days. Jack didn't try to help Liz after it happened. He stood far away and came into our building as soon as the ambulance arrived. Jack told me, my boss in HR, he has a phobia of birds, and later produced a letter from his therapist stating he has been in therapy and treatment for ornithophobia and anxiety for over 2 years. He explained it was why he tried to run from the bird and said he didn't help Liz after she got hit because the bird landed on the ground close to her. Understandably, Liz is angry. She wants Jack to be fired. HR was wary of firing Jack when he has had no previous trouble and has a phobia and mental illness that rise to the level of needing treatment, and so am I. When Liz found out that Jack wasn't going to be fired, she quit. Liz was working on a few projects, and without her there could be delays and extra costs incurred. We have tried to get her to come back, but she refuses unless Jack is fired. Jack called her with HR present to apologize, but she didn't accept and yelled at him. With Jack's permission, his phobia and mental health issues were explained to Liz, but she says she doesn't care. What should I do? I don't feel comfortable firing Jack or recommending it given what he disclosed. I'm not sure where to go from here. There was a police investigation because Liz was injured by a vehicle. Both the police and the driver's insurance company found Jack to be 100% at fault for what happened, based on multiple witness accounts that Jack had extended his arms back and then out when he pushed Liz and didn't just lightly bump into her. Liz agreed it was Jack's fault and not the driver. One of the mirrors on the vehicle was damaged when Liz was hit and Jack paid to have it repaired as a resolution with the driver, and everything between the driver and Jack has been settled. Jack has not been charged with anything. It is still a possibility that he might be. HR and Jack had attempted to keep in contact with Liz after she got out of the hospital to see if there was any chance of her coming back, but she never responded. Eventually both Jack and the company received a letter from a lawyer asking that they not contact Liz again. She never asked for money to pay her medical bills, didn't file a workers' comp claim, and didn't take any legal action against Jack. The legal department and the outside legal counsel who HR got a second opinion from had told Jack and the company to prepare for a claim and other legal action and advised all to settle because Liz had a strong case. Her letter stated she had decided to not take action and just wanted to move on for her own well-being. She now has another job. Our company was not contacted for a reference or employment history. I don't know if Liz told them what happened during the interview, but our industry in this area is small and I know for sure she has now told her new job everything that happened. After what happened, Jack told me he decided to take a break from therapy and look at his options. I was surprised and he volunteered that information without me asking. But since I am in a management position over him, I didn't think it was appropriate for me to comment or tell him that. His work is still excellent and he has had no disciplinary or work-related issues. Liz is still at her new job and has not attempted contact, legal or financial comp with Jack or the company we work for, either herself or through a lawyer or anyone else. Word about what happened and the aftermath has gotten around the industry a little. I have been asked about it by a few people I know from other places. I just tell them I have nothing to say and they stop asking. Jack is still working here. He has not re-entered therapy or isn't undergoing any kind of treatment. Thank you again for your assistance here. Happy holidays to you and your loved ones. Good afternoon. Thanks for printing my update, Allison. I am the op. Allison can verify that my name is the same as on the emails I sent her. I appreciate the input from Allison and everyone. I tried to keep my letter short and to the point, but I'm posting once to clarify some things that I see being discussed. Liz did not demand that Jack be fired. She quit, and when HR wanted to know what it would take for her to come back, she said firing Jack. This was right after her surgery before she was discharged. HR declined, so Liz said she would not return. She only told HR she wanted him fired because they asked first. I had no input or say in the company or Jack calling Liz at home. There was no checking in or asking how she was. They did want to convince her to come back and that was it. At no point did the company offers Liz financial assistance. According to her lawyer, she is on a 5-year payment plan with a hospital and rehab center for her bills. Jack is taking a break from therapy, meaning he is not seeing a therapist and has no plans to see any professional in the future. As I said in my letter, I did not feel it was appropriate for me to lecture him on his choice. I am sure Jack is embarrassed and mortified. The only apology he made was when HR asked him to call. A letter of apology was included to the driver as part of the settlement. That's all I have to say. Thank you.